the cool thing is, like, every stage of writing and publishing I've been through in the last 6 years, I've had some form of community and accountability, because you can't, if we were just operating on our own effort and our own, like, motivation, eventually that will run out. And there comes a point where you need a kick in the butt, and you need to be reminded that other people are in the same boat as you, and you're all moving towards the same destination.
Yeah, man, that's really powerful. That sense of community is like, it, even though you're bringing the thing to life, you're bringing the book to life, there are other people who maybe are on similar paths or in similar situations, in similar areas. And I think that, we can learn a lot from people in those spaces, and we can also teach others too in those spaces. But I don't think we have to, even though we're creating something new, I don't think we necessarily have to reinvent the wheel. Yeah, I'm actually excited to talk to you because I think this is something that's really is important. I don't think a lot of people read anymore, and I'm not sure. I don't know if that's because of the time commitment or what it is, but I feel like there's not a lot of reading going on. If it is, it's like a summary. Which, frankly, I do this. I look up a summary through like Chat GPT or something. I look up a summary for a book, and that's my reading. But it's not the same to get like into a book and to get like really captivated by it, because I know people who, when they start reading, they can't put it down until they're done. Especially if it's like a really interesting story or something. So but yeah, so the way we normally start out is if you can introduce yourself, whatever you want to say to preface conversation, and then we'll go from there.
Sounds good.
All right, so whenever you're ready, the floor is yours.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Tyler Snure. I am a fantasy author who gets kids and teens back into reading. I'm the author of The Jewels of Fate and The Sword of Sorinth. My first novel, The Jewels of Fate, launched when I was 17 years old, so I was just going into my grade 12 year of high school, and that was 6 years ago. And since then, I've been writing and publishing my second one, and then my third, which will come out hopefully later this year, and also doing school visits and a whole bunch of other stuff promoting the importance of reading and young entrepreneurship.
All right, so what really what inspired this? Like, how did you start this?
For sure. I was a huge reader growing up. I still am. But if you can see behind me, that's one of my big bookshelves in my room. And I have all the big series, like big YA teen series: Harry Potter, Percy Jackson, Hunger Games, Divergent, Maze Runner. The list goes on and on. So I read these series growing up, and they all together kind of simultaneously inspired me to start writing books of my own. It's very hard to pinpoint what specific moment or what specific book was like the push for me to start writing the Jewels of Fate. So I would say it's the culmination of all the books that I read growing up.
Okay. And so, did you like? Do you remember before you actually started writing? Did you have like these inspirations that come to you, like just these little snippets of like stories, or you know? Because I think about, the only thing I can really equate it to would be like, you think about a musician or a poet maybe, or something. Like, you just think about, like, I think about the movie, for some reason I think about the movie 8 Mile, where Eminem is on the bus and he has like the lyrics come to him and he just like jots it down really quick. Is it something similar to that? Like a story just comes to you and you're just kind of inspired by it?
Yes, sort of. So the Jewels of Fate actually started as a short story before it was even a novel. And
Okay.
this was back when I was probably grade 7. So I was around 13 years old, and we were in a creative writing class at my elementary school, and we were just asked to write something, anything.
Mm.
And that's kind of where the seed of this story was born. And I wrote it as a short story, didn't think much of it at the time, but as I reread it and started showing it to my parents and friends, like, they really liked the concept, and so I slowly started to grow and develop over time. So I would say, like, all the ideas, it took a while for them all to come. It wasn't like all at once. It was over a long period of time.
Okay. How this is just really fascinating to me, man, because I don't know. I just feel like you hear most people take, like, when they write a book, it takes like, a couple years or whatever. How long do you think these things took you?
The first one took me 5 years, and then my
Oh wow.
second novel was 3 years.
Okay. So why does it take so long to write a book?
Well, there's many factors that go into writing and kind of the timeline. One of the biggest ones is your time commitment. So for me, I was in elementary school at the time, which, let's be honest, really isn't a huge time commitment. But then when I got to high school and I had more responsibilities and extracurriculars, that's when I had to like focus on like 1 hour a day, and that seems like a small amount, but it adds up over time. But because I was in high school full time and because I had all of these other responsibilities, it kind of stretched out the timeline a bit. And same with my second book. I was in my first and second year of university at the time, which is a huge time commitment.
Mm,
So it's not like I could just spend all day writing,
right.
unfortunately, as much as I would love that.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Yeah, I don't know. I guess it's like you had to kind of pursue it as a passion type
Hmm.
thing before you could. I mean, because if you could spend all day doing it, that'd probably be great, you know.
Yes.
But I don't know, man. I feel like if I worked on an idea for like 5 years, by the time I finished it, like the beginning of it might change. You know what I mean? By the time
Mhm.
the 5 years is up.
Oh, for sure. And especially in the first novel, there were so many rewrites and so many
Mm,
adjustments. I think the beginning, like the first five chapters, changed at least 4 or 5 times, just because of the evolution that I was growing as a person and a writer the older I got.
yeah. Yeah, I've heard. I don't know. Yeah, I'm sure you know who this is. I've heard Jordan Peterson talk about when he was writing his book. Not, I think Maps of Meaning was his first big book.
Mhm.
And he talks about very complex topics, very, very deep issues. And I think he mentioned that he rewrote every single line several times. And I was thinking to myself, like, how is that even possible? But now that we're having this conversation, it makes sense because it's like if you work on something for that long and then you go back and look at it, maybe you have, more educated about it or different opinion about it or whatever. Uh, it makes sense.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I know a business coach that I follow, Alex Hermosi. He
Oh
has a
yeah, yeah,
couple books out, and he's openly said he's rewritten them multiple times from scratch, just
right.
because like the content changes or adjusts and gets better. And I mean the quality of the book shows, in my opinion. Like I think his books are great and super informative. But they took years to write because of that evolving
Mhm.
process.
Yeah. See, man, I'm kind of stuck in this thing. Like, I guess if I were writing a book, I would want it to be, as what as best quality as possible.
Mhm.
But at the same time, I feel like if you spend too much time analyzing like how good it is, you're never going to get the thing out.
For
And
sure, absolutely.
I'm a big believer in like, just do the thing. It's not going to be great the first time. It's never going to be perfect probably, but just put the thing out, just do it, whether it's a podcast or, a book or whatever. Because it's very easy to get stuck in that sort of cycle of like, because I don't know, I guess it makes us feel better that like we're technically working on it by improving it, but also we're kind of like working around it because we're
Yeah,
not just putting the thing out.
yeah, like avoiding the next step.
Right, right. Yeah.
Mhm.
And I think that's something I say all the time is like that we are really focused on being busy, but like not necessarily being productive.
Absolutely.
So
Mhm.
but I don't know, man. I get it though. I get it because if it's something creative like a book or something like an art piece of art, uh, you want it to be like the best quality possible, and I get that. But I just feel like part of making it that best quality is just putting it out because you can always write a follow-up book or whatever. But I don't know, writing is something I haven't really done much writing. I've done I've written like poetry and stuff, but I haven't written like
That's
short
cool.
stories or yeah.
See, I don't have a talent for poetry at all, so I'm always envious of people who can write poetry because it's not a skill that I have at all.
I mean, I feel like I'm decent at it, you know. It's basically just an analysis of like things that I see in life, and I don't mean like
Mhm.
like just I don't mean obvious things. I mean things like uh philosophies and different things we experience in life, grief and that kind of thing. I guess it's just more of like an expression, a way to I don't want to say cope because that puts a negative spin on it, but just
Mhm.
experience those things. You know what I mean? I guess it's a way to creatively think through those things that we experience in life. That would be a good way to say it.
For sure, yeah, yeah. I studied a little bit of poetry in school, and that was basically the gist of what the professors were saying in terms of how poetry is perceived.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very it's a unique form of writing, man. I feel like it's very I feel like if you can write poetry and if you can have a connection to it, at least for me anyways, it's like very I don't know how to describe it. It's like a I don't know how to describe it other than a connection to the things that you experience, like a way
Hmm.
to put that on paper in a creative way. Because you had to really think about it. Like you can't just write. It has to flow, and sometimes it has to rhyme if that's the thing or whatever. And like you have to really put thought into it. Not saying you don't have to
Hmm.
put thought into writing novels or anything, but I think just poetry is like it's a different spin.
Hmm.
Um, but so like reading, like what do you think? We were talking earlier about like they're not really reading a lot these days. And I think that I know there's a big time commitment. I know people have a lot to do, and there's a I don't know what the average book is to read. I would say maybe 10 hours, maybe something like that. 8 to 10
Roughly, I
hours.
don't know the exact stat, but that sounds pretty close.
Yeah, which isn't really a lot of time if you think about it. If you break it
Hmm.
up, But I mean, people could play video games for 8 hours straight and have no issues. So it's
Exactly.
like, yeah.
Hmm.
So, but what do you think? What's going like? Why are people not reading? Because especially with the people that you're sort of, I guess maybe your target audience, that those people don't really have. I mean, they have school and everything, but they don't really have jobs. It's like a big time commitment. So, what do you think it is
For
that's
sure.
stopping people from not reading as much?
So it's interesting you mentioned video games because there's a stat that says that teenagers spend an average of 8 to 9 hours on a screen per day, um, and that's
That is
like the
insane,
daily stat. And if if a novel takes roughly 10 hours to read, then teenagers are spending like all of that time on a screen, which we live in a digital age, 2025, like there's lots of uses for screens. Um, and like many things that you can do with a screen. Like, for example, we're having this conversation through a screen right now. That being said, as the amount of screen time increases, the amount of like reading time and therefore books read is drastically decreasing.
hmm.
And that's why I intentionally wrote the Jewels of Fate series to appeal to reluctant readers or those who wouldn't call themselves readers, because it's designed to read like a movie or a video game, and it's a decent sized book. Like it's just shy of 400 pages, but the chapters are really short, so it doesn't feel like a 400-page novel. And I intentionally designed it that way to appeal to non-readers, um, because I believe reading is so important.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah. I think, I don't know, man. The thing with the screens, I mean, I think a lot of people read books on screens, even like, you
Yes,
have the
yes,
Kindle and
ebooks are huge.
yeah, yeah. So I don't know the screen thing. I think in moderation, depending on what's on the screen, whether it's a video game or a book or whatever, I think that has a lot to do with the time on the screen. But the screen itself, the blue light and all that stuff is like a real concern,
Hmm. Hmm.
especially late at night. It's rough on your sleep, your circadian biology, all that stuff. But but yeah, I mean, I've never really been other than the summaries of like a book that I might read. I've never really been a screen reader like that. I don't know. It's not the same as a book. It's not the same
No,
as a. And people think I'm crazy, but I actually prefer paperback to hardback. I don't know. It's just
I'm the same way. I'm the same way.
yeah.
I don't read ebooks at all,
Yep.
just because I spend a lot of time on a screen already, like writing my books or like doing interviews and podcasts or school related things, right? When I was in school. So for me, reading, like it needs to be off the screen because like I'm already on it so much myself.
Hmm. So eh, I wanted to ask you about this because this is really interesting. I every once in a while, actually often, I'll have somebody come across the podcast and they have a book. And there's been several times they wanted me to read their book so that we could discuss it on the podcast. And I'm
Mhm.
like, dude, at this rate, I have like 5, 10 books I got to read. I'm
Yeah.
never going to read all these things. Like, so what is it? Do you have a technique or a philosophy to help people read quicker, but still like absorb the information? Do you know of anything? I mean, I know there's like techniques and stuff, but
Yeah, yeah, it first starts with the book that you choose, because not all books are designed the same, not all books are formatted the same, and even like the font and paragraph size can be wildly different. So that's the first step. So for me, one of my favorite, like I read more fiction, but I also read a little bit of nonfiction, to learn about writing and business and all of that.
Mm.
And one of my favorite books is this book called Published, and it's by a guy named Chandler Bolt who runs a big publishing company in the States. And it's, I think, no more than 200 pages. And it reads almost like a Diary of a Wimpy Kid book, if you are familiar with that series. So it's got the big font and the pictures and like the short paragraphs, and it's a speed read. Like I think I read it. It took me maybe a couple of hours to read, and that was spaced out, but still like no more than 2 or 3 hours, I don't think. My favorite nonfiction book because it was so easy to read and I was able to absorb that information and retain it and start to apply it and implement it. So I think that's the first step is picking the right book, because how a book is designed will impact like the information you take away from it.
Yeah, I probably should have prefaced this with this. If I do read anything, it's usually nonfiction.
Hmm.
I usually don't read any fiction, so I guess it's more. I guess if there's a story to it, is sort of captivating. But sometimes nonfiction stuff is a little boring, or tedious to read.
Yes.
But the benefit there is you're getting whatever information it is you're reading, whether it's a health protocol or whatever. So yeah, I don't know. I just feel like I think it was Bill Gates who said if they had one wish, they wish they could read quicker or something,
Hmm.
because
Hmm.
you could just I don't know, man. I think so. Like with AI, the way I understand AI is it basically it searches the internet for whatever you ask it and it provides you that information. So technically, I think that is a way to absorb that information quicker if it's summarized or whatever. I mean, obviously AI makes mistakes, and I've been kind of open about how I feel about AI, like us relying on it too much. I think
Hmm.
it can be really beneficial if we use it and don't become dependent on it.
I agree.
Uh, but yeah, because it's like there's like I use Perplexity is my thing. I don't use ChatGPT much, because I want to have the sources of the answer, whatever it came from, to check the sources. But yeah, I don't know. I think there's a difference between like reading for entertainment and reading for education for sure.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
yeah. So, what would do you have any sort of advice for maybe parents who are trying to get their children to read more? Because I know your books are sort of, I think you said, aimed more towards, is it 12 to 18, that range or
Yes.
something?
Hmm.
Okay. So do you have any recommendations as far as like getting kids to read more and maybe get off the screen a little bit more, or just read
For
more?
sure. Yeah, so when talking to parents about this, there are three factors that impact whether a teen will read a book. The first is the length of the book. So I always recommend under 500 pages, because avid readers can read over 500 pages, but you're not going to get a reluctant reader to read 500 pages or more. It's just not going to happen.
Hmm.
You can build to that, and that can be the goal, but like handing someone a 500-page novel when they have not read anything in the last year, not going to work. The second factor is chapter lengths. And the reason for this is shorter chapters promote a sense of accomplishment. So if uh, a kid finds difficulty reading or they're not into reading, but the chapters are only maybe 5 to 6 pages, and they read that, once they get to the end of the first chapter, they feel a sense of accomplishment that they achieved something. And they do that again with the second chapter and the third. And that's kind of what pushes them to keep reading. Of course, it helps if there's outside motivation. Like it's not just going to be intrinsic like that, but it's psychological. And the third is books that align with the kid's interests. So if your child is constantly playing video games or constantly watching movies, or maybe they are on YouTube all the time, but they love um, car videos, they love like the way cars are built and all stuff surrounding that, then get them a book that has something to do with cars. And it still can be fiction. Like there are lots of fiction books, based on cars, right?
Hmm.
Just find something that aligns with their interests, because that's also going to push them to like read the book.
Yeah, I actually really like that, man, especially that second point, because you mentioned that breaking the chapters down it creates a little bit of momentum
Hmm.
to to finish a chapter and to keep going on. And I think that sort of overlaps with something I talk about a lot of, like goal setting. setting
Yes.
goals. Like if you can break them down to a smaller bite-sized chunk, and then you start, chipping away at that, you have a little bit of momentum and a little bit of confidence you build with yourself. And it's encouraging to see that the same thing can be applied to reading a book, because I mean, you're right. 500 pages. If you think of like 500 pages, it sounds like a lot, but when you break it down by the chapter, it's like you can check off, that each chapter that you read. And yeah, I like that. So that makes me think too about, I never read these books as a kid, but the Harry Potter series, I mean, those books were what, 400 or 500 pages?
The later ones. The first few, I think, are around 300, and then once you get past the fourth, then it starts to get bigger and bigger.
Yeah. So what do you like? Because that was very popular when I was in high school. That was very popular with like teenagers and
Mhm.
people in that space. So what do you think it was that she was able to captivate that audience that really, wouldn't read all that much, but then she has these books, this 300 plus pages, and people just like consume it like it's just like crazy, like nobody's business. Was it
For
just the
sure.
story? It was just so captivating?
I mean, I'm not in J.K. Rowling's head, so this is speculation. I
Right,
don't know
right.
what her
I'm just curious
intentions
because
were.
she took something that like
Yeah.
wasn't, it was kind of hard to do. She captivated that audience.
Oh, for sure, for sure. And it was a global explosion when Harry
Right.
Potter
Yeah.
came out. My best guess would be the world building and the characters, and this concept of this kid learning he's a wizard and going to a school for like learning how to be a wizard. Like that premise wasn't really heard of at the time. Like there weren't a lot of books like it. And I don't think, I could be wrong, but I don't think the fantasy genre was too like pronounced at that time. Like there wasn't a lot of authors writing in the fantasy genre back in the like mid 90s. I mean, you had um, the author who wrote the Wheel of Time series. He was big back then, but I can't remember if Brandon Sanderson started in the 90s either. But there wasn't a lot. And then J.K. Rowling comes along with this really cool premise and really cool world, and the kids just eat it up.
What's fascinating, man, is like we have this, I don't want to say obsession, but we have this like really intense sort of attraction to like the fantasy world, like creating avatars either of
Mhm.
ourself or of other people that are not ourself, and projecting them into a fantasy. Like video games are like that, books are like that, movies even are like that. Like you watch an
Mhm.
action movie and there's a superhero and you admire the superhero, and it's like we have this fascination with this fantasy sort of avatar that I don't know if we maybe see ourselves in or see as a hero or we admire for some reason. But it's like there's such a, I don't know even how to describe that, man, because like I think video games are a really good example of this. Like you can build this character up, you can play a video game, you can build this character, you can have all these stats and you can do all these things. But then it's like there's a message that sort of translates into the real world that you can like do that with yourself.
Mhm.
You can play this avatar of yourself and you can do these things. Like you can start these businesses, you can write these books, you can create these things out in the real world. And
Mhm.
so
Absolutely.
I wonder why there's sort of a disconnection there. Maybe I don't know, maybe it's easier on video games or whatever, but like in real life you can do these things. I mean, you can't live in the fantasy world in real life. There's certain laws of physics we can't break in the real
For
world, and
sure.
I get that. But like you can still build up this avatar, in this life that we have. Like I mean, this life could literally be a video game.
For sure. Yeah. It I think effort is a huge part of it because um like we were saying earlier, you can play a video game for 8 hours straight, and you might beat the video game in 8 hours, depending on the game.
Yep.
Um, like it's I can't think of anything really worthwhile and really big that you can do in just 8 hours. Like
Right.
anything worthwhile, like whether that is training for a marathon or a big race, whether it's writing a book, whether it's building a business, um, maybe building a relationship with your partner and like raising a family, like none of that you can do in 8 hours. Like it takes a long, long time and it's very, very worth it, but it's a huge time commitment. So I think
Mm.
it is easier to just play a video game because you know that in 8 hours you can beat the game and there you go, then you're done.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. I think I guess the thing would be like, as far as life goes, we don't know how long that is. We don't know if that's 8 hours or 80 years or whatever. Like we
Yes.
don't know, you know. And so my thing is like, you're already here. You know, you're already in the game. So like,
Hmm.
why not just try to do what you can? I don't know, man. I have a different philosophy of it. I guess I think that because I used to play video games a lot when I was a kid, a teenager. Uh, we Destiny was big when I was that age. Call of
Hmm.
Duty, of course, which is still around surprisingly. Halo and all those things. But it was like if we're already here and we're already playing this game of life that we call life, why not try to this is my philosophy. Why not try to build the character that we I guess maybe admire for ourselves, you know, because we're already here.
Hmm.
I mean, we're already like we don't know how long it's gonna last. But I think you're right. I think the effort has a big part of that because that is exactly right. You can't build anything sort of worthwhile in 8 hours. I mean, maybe you
Hmm.
could, you know, but probably not. And I think that's a pretty good sort of real world example of something we talk on here a lot, which is sort of this overnight success mentality. You know,
Hmm.
we're sort of bought into this vision that we can have basically anything we want quickly and without effort.
Yeah, it
Um,
doesn't work that way.
yeah, yeah, no, it doesn't. You know, and I guess too, you have to kind of ask yourself, like, what? I guess the question comes down to what really matters for you. Like, what really matter? What is your thing that you're trying to pursue in life? And the answer to that question will probably guide. You know, if it's something like something long term, like something over several decades, or if it's something like shorter term, like what we're talking about with video games. But I think
Hmm.
it's important to know that for yourself so that you can guide yourself with that.
Absolutely.
Um, I wanted to ask you earlier. You were talking about like how long it took you to write this book. What do you ever experience like writer's block or anything like where it just doesn't come to you?
All the time,
Hmm.
especially in that messy middle part of the book. So
Right.
the beginning is usually fine because that's where the excitement is and like the novelty of starting a new book. And then the closer you get to the end, you get excited by the finale and wrapping up the book or the series. So like that's what pushes you. But then there's this part in the middle where that's where most of the plot holes happen. It's where most of the procrastination happens, where your mind starts to wander and think about other projects or other things. Um, and sometimes you hit writer's block where you don't know how to move forward in the story. So you've written point A, the beginning, and you know point B is the end of the story, and you know what that looks like, but
Hmm.
how to get there is unclear. Um, and that's where a lot of writers struggle is in that middle part.
Okay. Well, I'm actually glad to hear you say that because what I'm hoping is that somebody who's in that spot will hear that and hear that everybody sort of experiences that. Because
Mhm.
I think a lot of times if we try something, whether it's like writing or whatever, and it feels difficult from time to time, or maybe the majority of the time, um, we feel that like maybe we're passionate about it, but maybe it's not for us because it's difficult to do or whatever. But
Yes.
so what you're saying is this is something that kind of everybody experiences from time to time in this space.
Oh, for sure. I've
Yeah.
written 3 books now, and every single one, the messy middle is where I got majorly stuck in writer's block, and I had to rework the middle and like brainstorm ways to for the character to get out of the situation, or how is the plot going to move forward, or is the plot even interesting enough? Does it need to be spiced up a bit more? Every single book, I've encountered that.
Hmm. That's interesting. Do you have any like techniques to sort of break out of that? Or I know you said brainstorming, but is there any like anything else? Any other techniques?
Yes. So the first step is taking a step back from the story because
Mm,
there's two kinds of writer's block. There is the first kind that's more like creative based. So it's what we were talking about before, where you don't know how the story is going to move forward, or a character feels flat and needs kind of like a rebrand, um, or the world building is off and you need to figure out like more about the world, things like that. I recommend like brainstorming in that case, figuring out what exactly is the problem you are trying to solve, and then brainstorm different ways to um, like overcome that problem. So let's say a character needs to get from point A to point B, list out 10 ways that they can get there, or 10 ways the story can move them forward. And then look them over, pick the best one, and then write that into the story. The second form of writer's block is like physical writer's block. It's when this usually happens in the editing stage where you've read the story so many times and you're so used to it and it's so ingrained in your brain, it's lost its flavor. So this is when all writers start to wonder if anyone's going to want to read their book because they've read it over and over and over and over again so many times that they've completely lost interest in it. And in that scenario, I recommend taking a step back, maybe for a day or two, like depending on what your timeline and deadline is, and doing something else that's creative that can like inspire you or fill you back up creatively. So that can be reading, that can be watching a movie, maybe it could be playing a video game. I don't know what fills you up creatively. For some, it's walking around in nature. Like there's many different ways that we fill ourselves creatively. But when we're empty like that, it's so important to fill ourselves back up. Otherwise, we're not going to finish the story.
This episode is brought to you by Excel Coaching Academy. Hey guys, I'm really excited to let you know that I started a mindset coaching business. So what I want to do with this business is I want to help entrepreneurs, business owners, salespeople, leaders, and fitness enthusiasts or athletes develop the right mindset to increase revenue, improve business or performance, and overcome the challenges needed to become the best version of themselves. You can get more information about this by emailing info@excelcoaching.academy. Right. Yeah. Yeah, we on this podcast we talk a lot about like consistency and discipline and that kind of stuff. And I think for the longest time there's been this sort of philosophy that when you're like disciplined towards a thing, or you're consistent towards a thing, that you're just kind of beating yourself into the ground for this thing basically. But I don't think that's productive for anybody. You know, I think you have to know what your limits are. And I always tell people too that like consistency is a direction, not an action. So as long as I'm sure you've probably had this experience. Maybe one day you write a paragraph and one day you write, a chapter, I mean, it's just like, it's just moving in that direction. But yeah, I think taking a step back from things from that, I can definitely see how that would be beneficial, just allowing yourself to sort of reset. There's so I can't remember what exactly the different brain waves are. Your brain goes through a series of waves, and whatever it is when you are about to fall asleep, whatever that brain wave is, I've heard is when you're at your most creative, because like when you wake up, you go through your day, that's when you're most alert, and then whatever that wave is towards the end of the day, that's when you have your most creative, I guess, thoughts or whatever. And I've heard a lot of people writing creative stories in that sort of late afternoon time frame, which makes sense. I mean, it makes sense because I think about like, not early morning. I'm definitely not early mornings, but like mid mornings, midday for me, it's like high alert. It's I would be able to have what would you say, like the accuracy intellectually, but like as far as creative goes, I don't know if I could be that creative at that time period.
Well, it all depends, and everyone's different. So for me, I am more creative in the morning. So my writing time, my sweet spot is usually between 9 to 11. And if I'm writing in that time, I'm more likely to be creative and therefore more productive, get more done. Whereas if I'm writing in the afternoon or late at night, it's for me, I don't feel creative at that time. So I guess everyone's like different, and everyone's like sleep patterns and rhythms are different, because I know there's some authors who um, like wake up in the middle of the night and they write for 2 hours and they go back to bed. And that works for them. Or some authors are like on a nocturnal schedule where they will sleep until noon and then write till like 2 o'clock in the morning, and then like repeat that over and over. So it depends on who you are and on how your body functions.
Yeah. Well, that's exactly what I was talking about. You kind of have to know yourself, know what works
Exactly.
for you. And I think that's a good point. You mentioned earlier about sort of like rereading your own story to the point where you lose interest in it. And I imagine that most creative people like experience this, because I tell people all the time that entrepreneurship is a form of art. It is an art form because there's so much creativity that goes into it. I mean, there's things that have worked for other people and you can somewhat follow that, but at the same time, you have to figure out first of all, you're bringing something to the world, a business that didn't exist beforehand. But then you also have to figure out how to make it work, how to sell your thing and all that kind of stuff. But like, so we talk about writing, we talk about things like painting, poetry, entrepreneurship. what do you, when you sort of try to do this thing, and I'm sure you have these thoughts of like, oh man, this isn't going to resonate with people. They're not going to find this interesting, whatever the case is. Uh, how do you sort of get through those? I mean, I would call those limiting beliefs. Like
Mhm.
you're telling yourself a thing that essentially, you know, I mean, you're creating the thing. You're bringing the story to life. So I can only imagine what goes through your head as far as like, will people be receptive to it?
Mhm. For sure. My biggest advice there is community for sure, because
Mm,
writing a novel is a very solo act, and it can be very lonely unless you have community around you. So for me, when I was publishing my first novel, I was part of a writers group at my church that met monthly, and it was more of like an inspiration thing than anything else. We talked about the projects we were working on and like the struggles we were having, and that's what's got me through like the early stages of writing and publishing. And then now I have a business coach. I'm in a business program because I'm focused on book marketing and selling my books and growing it as a business. So I need accountability and support and community in that area. Um, but the cool thing is, like, every stage of writing and publishing I've been through in the last 6 years, I've had some form of community and accountability, because you can't, if we were just operating on our own effort and our own um like motivation, eventually that will run out, and there comes a point where you need a kick in the butt, and you need to be
mm,
reminded that other people are in the same boat as you, and you're all
yep.
moving towards the same destination.
Yeah, man, that's really powerful. That sense of community is like, it, even though you're bringing the thing to life, you're bringing the book to life. There are other people who maybe are on similar paths or in similar situations, in similar areas. And I think that, we can learn a lot from people in those spaces. And we can also teach others too in those spaces.
Hmm.
But I don't think we have to, even though we're creating something new, I don't think we necessarily have to reinvent the wheel.
For sure. For sure.
Yeah. Man. And it's like, sometimes too, you'll be surprised because it might be difficult for you to see this in yourself or believe in yourself in this space, but then you meet somebody who's maybe, several books ahead of you, and they see something in you that you can't see in yourself. And so sometimes you have to borrow somebody else's belief in you before you can believe in yourself. And I
Exactly.
think I think you can only meet people in those spaces, when you can only meet people when you put yourself in those spaces with people who are sort of, let's call it more, farther ahead than you. I
Hmm.
mean, if farther ahead is even a thing, because we're sort of our our success timeline is subjective to us. I mean, it's not like we're competing with anybody. But I
Oh,
mean, I'm
for
just saying
sure.
there's more people who have done, written more books or done more businesses or whatever than you. And I think that what's the expression? Put if you're the smartest guy in the room, you're in the wrong
you
room.
yes, I was just about to say that. Yes.
Right? Yeah. And so I don't know, man. There's just really there's power in that. It's very powerful. And I wish when I was early in entrepreneurship, I wish somebody would have told me how important it was to network with other people, similar to what you're doing.
Mhm. It's so important, and but it's also important to avoid the flip side too. If you're constantly around people who don't understand what you're doing, or like actively trying to pull you down because it might make them feel better to see
Right.
you fail, then that's going to cause detriment to you. And so it's so important to have that discernment of the groups of people that you want to be hanging around, who are going to like push you and encourage you, because if you're constantly being told like you can't do it, or why are you doing this, or just get a real job, or it's not going to work, like eventually you will start to think those things too, and that could hold you right in your tracks too.
Hmm. Yeah, man, that's such a good point because it's like, and I tell people this a lot in the entrepreneurship space, but unfortunately, the people around you may not understand what it is that you're trying to do for yourself,
Hmm.
and if somebody tells you something like, don't write this book, don't start this business, you're going to lose all your money or whatever. I want to be an optimist, and I want to say that that comes from a place of love. They're trying to look out for you.
Yes.
Sometimes maybe not the case, but let's
Yes.
just say most of the time it's the case. But at the same time, you have to ask yourself, like we talked about earlier, how important is this thing to you? If you try and it fails, but you have the experience of that, is that worth the quote unquote failure to you? I mean, that's the question.
For sure.
Because, it's like I can't imagine if we have something we want to do, whether it's a book or a business or whatever, and we don't do that thing out of fear that it might fail. Well, how are we going to feel down the road looking back thinking, what if,
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
No one wants to reach the end of their life thinking, well, what if?
Hmm.
Like that's just not a good space to be in.
Right.
So I'm a
Absolutely.
big believer in going for it. And I tell when I do school visits, and I always say, like, you are never too young to write a novel. Like I did it in when I was 17 years old. Like, there's nothing stopping you. You can even do it younger than me. Like, 15-year-olds can publish, no problem. But it's you've got to have that motivation, like we talked about.
Yep.
Um, yeah, and like, you got to ask yourself, like, how badly do you want it, and are you willing to go through the steps and the criticism and all the things that come with it to come out on the other side. um, are you willing to try to get like the result that you want?
Yeah, for sure. And I think too, I think volume is important. I think putting the reps in is important. I was going to ask you this
Yes.
earlier. Um, if you had to sort of like think of a percentage of like the things that you write, let's say you're writing a book. So what you write for this book versus what actually makes it to the book. What do you think like that percentage that actually makes it to the, because I know you probably take some things out, change some things or
Yes.
whatever.
Oh, I've never been asked that before. um I would say, rough guess, probably 30 to 50%
Hmm.
of the first draft makes it into the final book. Because either, well, in my editing process, I go through it scene by scene and I cut out scenes and then I add scenes. So there's a lot of changes there. And then the next is um, dialogue and characterization. So I trim dialogue, or I add dialogue, or I change it. Like, does this sound like the right character that I want it to sound like? And then the final stage is, just like the line edits and like more words. So swapping out individual words. But overall, I'd say it's roughly 30 to 50% of the book changes from the first draft to like what gets put on the shelf.
Yeah, man, that makes sense. That sounds about right. Because
Hmm.
I've been told in the business space that if you want to sell, I think this number is very low, but if you want to sell, try to sell to 3 different people, and you might get one. I think that's a pretty
Yes.
low. I would say it's probably a 10-to-1 ratio, to be honest with you. But I mean, because I've knocked on doors and made cold calls and stuff, and it's just like 10-to-1 might actually be even kind of generous. But it's
Oh, for
like,
sure.
I mean, a lot of the things that you do, they don't make it really to the final product. But I mean, it might be just that 1 or 2 or 3 sales that you need to really change everything. Like if you have this book and you're working on it, and just say 50% makes it to the final book, well, that's what you need. You
Oh,
know,
for sure.
yeah. And so I don't know. I think with a lot of things, and I love how this lesson sort of translates into the real world, to real life, to other areas of life. But it's like I think just putting in the reps and making that volume, and having that, um, I don't know, I guess maybe experience, just having that experience of the volume of that thing, I think it's really beneficial. Um, so I'm not sure. So you had 2 books, right?
Yes.
And what were they again?
The Jewels of Fate and The Sword of Sorenth. So this is the first one that I came out when I was 17 years old. And
Okay.
The Sword of Sorenth launched in 2022, and it actually hit number 8 on Amazon's bestseller list in the fantasy category during its launch week, which was pretty exciting.
Oh wow, yeah.
So it is a kids teen fantasy trilogy. So the third book will wrap up the series. Similar to Percy Jackson and Harry Potter, about this boy. He gets summoned by the queen of a mysterious kingdom to carry out a secret request. And he gets pulled from his homeworld, which is New York City, into this mysterious, um, like, fantasy magical world called Echinacea.
Hmm. Yeah, that is interesting. That was just that little summary was interesting. So you said that there's a third book. Are you
Yes,
working on that now?
yes, it's the one I'm editing currently.
Okay. Do you have like an estimate on when that's gonna be finished?
Sometime in 2025. So we're looking at right now probably fall of 2025.
Okay, nice. Um, so do you have a website, or are these books on Amazon or anything?
Yes, yes. So my website is snurestories.com. So just my name, SNURE, and then stories.com. You can find all the information about my books and all the other stuff I do, speaking, podcasts, all that kind of thing. I also have a personality quiz that will tell you which character in the book you're most like.
Hmm.
All that information's on my website, and they are also available on Amazon too. So if you go on Amazon and search either The Jewels of Fate or Tyler Snure, both will direct you to my books.
Okay. I'm curious about this personality quiz. If you had to, how many characters, like main characters, are in the book? Like
Five.
okay, five. Okay, yeah. So there's do you know what personality I guess assessment it uses to assess, or does it just make a connection to the characters? Because there's different like personality tests, you know.
Yes, yes. It's not based on a scientific personality
Okay, okay,
test. It's more of like a fun, like loosely based on your own personality kind of thing.
I
However,
got you.
the results are pretty accurate. I have yet to meet someone who took the quiz and got an answer that they did not agree with at all. Like they're like,
Hmm.
I am not this character at all. So I would say it's pretty accurate. Um, yes, but there are five different characters, and they each belong to a different field of magic. So in the series, all the characters fall under one of these categories that define what powers you have, what abilities you have, and even sometimes like what interests you have. So, for example, you can be something like combat magic. That's one of them, and that's basically where you like to fight, but using magic. So all this spell related stuff. And then another one is called elements, and that's basically controlling the weather, talking to animals, like plant related things, all that. Um, so it's you find out which one you would be if you take the quiz.
Okay, nice. You know, like while we're having this conversation, man, it made me think. You think about like disc personalities assessment. I think there's a couple others. It's like usually like 4 or 5 personalities is like people fall into those, and these are like the scientific ones. But it's crazy to think about like how many people are on the actual planet, and like
Yeah,
so many different variations in personality, but yet we can all fit mostly into one of these categories. I mean, it's insane to me. I feel like
that
there would
is
be like
wild. Yeah.
way more. I feel like there would just be way more categories.
Yeah, I honestly don't know how that works. The fact that 8 billion people can be categorized into,
Right.
five different things. But what's interesting is sometimes you can be both, right?
Yep.
Like you can
Yep.
fit easily into one category, but you can also fit into another. And maybe that's what makes you different from the person next to you.
Hmm. Well, I think too, though, and I talk about this a lot on here. I think being aware of where you are on that quote unquote spectrum of those different personalities, I think that's very important because you might have a plan on how you present yourself to others, how you come across, but the way you actually come across might be very different.
Hmm.
You know, and so I think just having that self awareness is really critical. To just to know where you are on that scale. So, one thing that I ask everybody before we close, if you could share one of the most important lessons you've ever learned, it can be from your personal life if you're comfortable sharing it, or writing, your career, whatever it is. If you could share one of the most valuable, most important lessons you ever learned, what do you think that would be?
I would say community and
Mm,
uh, having that encouragement and people rooting for you. Um, I've been lucky to have, very supportive parents who have really pushed me and like actively been involved in my book writing and like book publishing and even book marketing. And I've had super supportive friends and family who came to my last launch a couple of years ago and like packed the room. Um, but I've also done this long enough to meet other entrepreneurs who didn't have that support system. Um, and I think if you aren't naturally given that support system, whether through, family or friends or the people around you, it's so important to actively seek it yourself,
Mm.
because there is, like I said, like you can join programs, or you can find mentorship, or join community groups, or whatever it is. But having someone rooting for you is so important, because entrepreneurship is hard. Like anything worthwhile
Yep.
is hard, and there are going to be days where you want to quit, and that's when you need someone to tell you to keep going.
Mm. I love that, man, because like we were talking about earlier, being in those rooms with people, I think a big thing for a lot of people, especially if you're in a creative space, if you're bringing something to the world, it's probably not likely you're going to find anybody in your immediate circle, or maybe your town. Even if you live in a small town, you might not find anybody around you that sort of is on the same path or has the same philosophy that you do. But I think that's one of the benefits of like social media and the internet, is that you can find people who are on a similar path, who are on similar situations. Because unfortunately, if you live in a small area, a very rural area, small town, whatever it is, if it can be discouraging to find people who are not on that path, who don't understand maybe what your message is, or who, like you said earlier, like just get a real job or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But it's like that can be really discouraging, especially for a person who's doing something that maybe they're really passionate about. They're doing it for the first time, all that. So I think, I think community, that's absolutely, and dude, there's a Facebook group for literally everything. Like,
Oh yeah.
if you can think of it, there's a Facebook group for it.
Mhm. Oh
Yeah.
yeah. There's a Facebook group for national dog walkers, like
Right.
anything.
Yeah. Well, listen, man, it's been a good conversation. I appreciate what you're doing out there, trying to get people to read more and sharing your creativity. I think that's very important. I think, like I said earlier, I don't think a lot of people, we're not reading enough. And I think that, everybody's busy and all that. And I get that. And I mean, we have audio books, like you can listen to a book. I don't think that's the same. I don't really retain as much information that way. But at the same time, I consider myself one of those people who don't really have the time to read. So if I listen to a
Mhm.
book, I'll give myself, if I can retain 10%, that's 10% I didn't have, So
Exactly.
yeah, but I do appreciate it. Hang out for just a second. I'll explain to you how I upload this thing, but it's been a good conversation with you today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Hey guys, I appreciate you tuning in today. If you enjoyed this episode, you can find more content at Pure Wisdom Podcast. This is on Facebook, Instagram, Rumble, TikTok, YouTube, Spotify, Amazon Music, and Apple and Google Podcasts. There you can like, share, subscribe, and we will see you next time.